Hello, and welcome to Afternoon Tea with Docs. My name is Dr. Linda. I'm an emergency medicine physician here from Sheffield, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Dr. Erica, who is a GP from the West Midlands, and we are both board-certified lifestyle medicine physicians. It's so lovely to see so many of you joining us today here on Zoom and also on YouTube, as well as on Facebook. Hello, everyone. Well, if you're new to us, here, well, every Sunday at 5 p.m. UK time, we go online so that we can bring you a chat with world-renowned health experts, just like our guest today, Dr. Nilesh Satguru, with the mission to bust medical misinformation and help you prevent, treat, and reverse lifestyle-related chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and unwanted weight gain. So if you want to check out our interviews, you can watch them on YouTube. You can say hello on Instagram, as well as on Facebook and LinkedIn, and let us know how you're feeling. What are your troubles in your health gain? We are always bringing this event to you free of charge. So if you feel like buying us a tea, you're more than welcome by going on our website to afternoonteawithdocs.com and go to donate. Thank you very much.
So today we've got Dr. Nilesh Satguru joining us to talk about self-compassion. Dr. Nilesh Satguru helps compassionate entrepreneurs serve from their highest potential without sacrificing their freedom. Nilesh's coaching business was honoured for its success and dedication to serving others in the CREA Global Awards. He has been featured on the front cover of Brains magazine and was recognised by Disrupt magazine as 10 leading performance coaches to follow. He is also director for the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine and sat on the UK's National Sleep Steering Committee. Nilesh's mission is to challenge compassionate change makers to believe in growth. He loves to connect with people, so be in touch with him via Instagram. We'll pop the link in the chat.
Hello, Nilesh. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Linda. And just to everyone, I see you all, Sean, Sudhir, Linda, Daryl, Beth, Monica, I see everyone. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today, Nilesh, on a Sunday afternoon. Just before we dive into the topic of self-compassion, I just want to ask you if you could share with us your journey to becoming a doctor. What got you where you are today?
Wow. Thanks so much, guys. You know, actually, it's a funny thing. I think ever since I was very, very little, probably about 6 years old, I remember having quite an interest in caring, and I was also quite fascinated. Both my parents were into science. My dad was into chemistry, and my mum was more into physics. And so, like many people do, that seemed a natural path. You're interested in caring, you're interested in science, and I honestly started sort of then dreaming of working in medicine. But there was loads of twists and turns. You know, for a while I was going to go and do French at university and do a gap year and go and find myself. In fact, I applied for medicine for a deferred position, and I changed my application about 2 months before, and very fortuitously Southampton let me in, and the rest is history. So that was 15 years ago now. It seems like like yesterday, but it was a while ago.
And so what are you doing now?
So now everything's taken a real sort of change. My career I was very interested in general practice, and so I went into general practice pretty much from early junior doctor years. For all the medics in here, it was kind of from F1. I think I knew I wanted to do GP, but I went straight into that, loved it, and became a partner straight out of training, and that was when I was 27. And so the short story of this is that basically I signed a contract on the dotted line saying that I would have a job, and it was a job of my dreams for 38 years. or if I died. You know, the contract would be ended like if you died, or at the end of the 38 years when you're 65.
Oh my goodness.
Which brought up quite a lot of existential questions, right? I'm sure many people have had this kind of moment where they think, wow, this is everything. I was extremely grateful at that stage. It was very lucky how that happened. And I started working there. I loved general practice, but I just knew something wasn't quite right. And so after a while, I continued to work. I worked there for 3 years and ended up leaving that partnership. So that was then in get my dates right, in 2019. And that's when I found lifestyle medicine. And through then, it was a partner at my practice who I'm still really close with. He introduced me to lifestyle medicine. And yeah, I was completely besotted with it, kind of like you guys. And it sort of took up all of my time. I was reading and very fascinated by all of the work that was being shared. And then I started to work in a clinic, in a GP clinic, still seeing patients, but I was also working in occupational medicine. For any of you guys who I'm sure you know about occupational medicine, but it's basically supporting companies with their health. And I'd have these 1 hour long appointments with these patients that were really poorly. They had loads of health conditions, chronic health conditions, fibromyalgia, diabetes, heart disease, at young ages, stress, burnout. And it was there that things really started to shift. I started to have these really deep conversations with people, and in 45 minutes, it was a really like sort of eye-opening experience. And often I'd hear back from these patients saying that they started to turn things around, etc. And that then led me to doing what I'm doing now, which is instead of working just with the staff, I basically work with the business owners to help them help themselves and their staff serve from the highest potential, like you say. So it's coaching that they do now, and everything's kind of led one thing to another. So it's been quite a fun journey, full of twists and turns.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. So I still have an affiliation with a practice, but right now the business has really been taking center stage, so I can work with these leaders to try and like we say in the talk, to choose compassion and focus on connection.
So, I wanted to know what drew you to general practice, and then what was not quite right that made you think about leaving that partnership?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I now know, the short answer to that is what I now know was that it just wasn't aligned with my values.
Mm.
And we can speak about this actually, because I know there's a lot of kind of medical spin, and I know a lot of people are interested in the medicine here, but ultimately, if we know from the blue zones, let's say, people who are living a purposeful and meaningful life is one of the sort of key characteristics of these blue zones. I know you guys are with me on this, but it's the areas of the world that have got the highest concentration of centenarians. So your Okinawas, your Ikaria, etc. And actually there, it's not the perfect diet. It's all about meaning and purpose, connection. So if for me, I had this sort of voice in my head. I know many people would have had this saying, this isn't right. I mean, I put an email out earlier this week. The wait time at the practice that I was working, routine wait time, is 33 days. It hurt me, this. I see it. I'd see patients come in saying, I've waited over a month to see you. And so at the time then, I started on this mission to reform the appointment system. And we got very close, but things didn't quite work out. So I think that experience taught me that my values just weren't quite aligned. But at that time, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my values. I didn't understand any of that. And it was very much a baptism of fire. It was very much a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of disagreements. A lot of the stuff that I'll share with you is through, and I still make them, but a lot of mistakes that I made back then. Mm. So general practice per se, I loved everything about community care. I loved the fact that you could see anyone from a baby to someone who is right at the end of their life. I love the connection. I love that you can have a connection. Of course, like everyone, time is a real factor in general practice. And that was where I kind of, I started off thinking I was going to be the 10-minute GP, and I quickly chucked that idea away and realized that some people just needed extra time, and others you
take more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So it was mainly that the values weren't aligned, Erica, but general practice per se, there's nothing that I have that I felt that was wrong with general practice. What I did, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now is just a question of desires. You know, I had a much higher desire to work with what I'm doing now compared to what I was doing before, and it wasn't from a place of disillusion, but more from a place of adoration for what I'm doing right now.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. And so, in your journey to kind of getting to where you are today, you discovered self-compassion along the journey. And can you tell us the story of how that came about?
Sure, yeah. And forgive me if, I know you probably heard this a few times, so forgive me if this is stuff, forgive me if this is stuff that you guys have heard before. But so there was one patient in particular, and it was a very kind of key moment. And so I mentioned the surgery. I was working there. There was a 33-day routine wait time. I remember sitting in my practice, and I was very stressed, basically. Now I know that. I wouldn't have admitted that at the time. And I was probably 30 minutes behind. All I was thinking is I need to get this patient, right? Not even thinking of her by name, and get this patient in, help them and move them on, because we've got all these meetings, we've got these emails, we've got this appointment system to reform. And just to put this into context, my patient list was about 2,500 patients, and the surgery was 18,500 patients. And there are only, I think, 7 or 8 full-time, well, they weren't even full-time, but there's 7 or 8 kind of partnership doctors there. So this lady came in, and she had this terrible headache. And she had a headache which was over her eye. She also had some changes in her vision, some floaters, basically, some new onset things that she could see in her vision. And so with the classic medical textbook, I thought, right, new onset floaters, this needs to go to the eye unit. So I organized that for this patient, went to the eye unit. The diagnosis was as I expected. But the truth was, and this is what I know with retrospect, was that I wasn't really on my A game. I didn't show any clear awareness of this person's suffering. I didn't show an agreement in the meaning of their circumstances. It's a key point. And last of all, I didn't really take action to relieve that person's specific suffering. And what transpired was I received this, really, I remember it very well. It was a very vivid and honest and real complaint. And within this complaint were basically various statements about my character as a doctor. Luckily, the lady didn't come to any sort of physical harm, but there was a lot of emotional harm that came from this. To put this into context, the lady's a very successful entrepreneur who just was not used to being sick, even for a day or a few days, and it wasn't really an option for her to stop in her eyes, and I can understand why now. So what happened was, if anyone knows me, they'll know that this is quite shocking, but I didn't really speak for a couple of weeks. My wife was really, she knows that I love to talk. So she was like, wow, there's something that's really significant happening. She called my friend, my best friend, and asked me to, talk it out. I had to carry on seeing patients, felt a bit numb, I think, over those few weeks. And it was only through that I then realized that compassion is the answer, first for myself in that moment, and next of all for patients, to show an awareness of their suffering. And this is a key bit, to show an agreement in the meaning of their circumstances. Okay, to understand the story behind the person, understand that it makes sense how they're behaving now compared to what they've been through. And then last of all, to take action to relieve their suffering. And so, it was through that experience that it led to what I'm doing right now, led to what I'm talking to you guys about today, which is to choose compassion and focus on connection. I think if you do those two things alone, whether it's for your health, whether it's for your happiness, whether it's in your business, whatever it is, if you keep those two phrases with you, you'll be living a more peaceful, joyful, and connected existence. So that was a real turning point. And I think through that, I really kind of became very interested in, at the time, I was very interested in meditation as well. But that kind of really skyrocketed my meditation practice. And I really went deep in a lot of compassion-based meditations, Erica. So that was kind of my journey.
And interesting what you said about suffering there, because actually that's something that we all share as human beings. We all have our own sufferings in whatever shape or form. And there's a lot more commonality between, you know, us as human beings than there are differences. And sometimes I think perhaps we tend to see the difference and ignore the common grounds, creating this kind of me versus you, me versus others type mentality, which I think the way that we've been kind of brought up in society, there's a lot of I think more emphasis on something, you know, self-esteem these days.
Yeah.
And to build your own self-esteem, because it's almost even an insult to say that you're average, right?
Yeah.
If you call somebody average, you almost feel like it's an insult. So everyone's trying to be above average. And when everyone's trying to be above average, and you to build your own self-esteem, you almost kind of have to see other people as different, or there is that kind of bullying or prejudice mentality that goes into it. Do you agree?
I completely hear you, and I know I can tell the books that you're reading, and we've read the same books, so that's it's such an important concept. Let's talk about the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion, guys, because this is a real key difference. Remember, nothing is either good nor bad, only our thinking makes it so. I must have used that phrase in various ways, like millions of times. It is so true, and it's a non-judgmental approach.
It is, and I say something similar in that, like, there is no everything is neutral, and like everything is neutral feedback, and there is no good or bad. It's just how you look at it, and
exactly,
you know, where you're standing from.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And you know, if there's one sort of aim of this whole conversation, guys, it's just for you to take away one aspect. You're going to see yourself or see the world differently. That, you know, that's a very powerful thing. But let's talk about self-esteem and self-compassion. Let's talk about the two kind of leading lights in those areas. So Dr. Nathaniel Branden, he is the leading light of self-esteem. This movement was actually quite some time ago. This is kind of in the 80s, 90s. Dr. Nathaniel Branden is dead now. He's written a famous book called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. Very interesting, definitely worth checking out. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of crossover between self-esteem and self-compassion. Self-acceptance is something they talk about in self-esteem. Practicing with integrity, with intentionality. These are kind of same things that we talk about. But the big difference is this, and it's exactly what Erica was speaking about so eloquently, is this piece of common humanity. So self-esteem says, I will love myself as long as I have positive regard of my circumstances and what I'm doing. Self-compassion says, I'll accept myself despite of my challenges, and I'll set a future intention for growth. And there's something kind of in between that. So I'll accept myself despite my challenges, any negative experiences, any negative emotions I might have, because we all have negative emotions and experiences. And that's the key difference between self-compassion and self-esteem. Self-esteem is about me, self-compassion is about we. It's about a common humanity. It's something that we all experience, we all struggle with. I have a little story just to put this into context. Erica very kindly asked me before, am I Buddhist? I'm not actually Buddhist, but I do love some of the fables from some of the stories. And there's this wonderful story. It's in actually Tara Brach's book, Radical Compassion. I recommend people check that if you're interested. Just for anyone who thinks, you know, is it only me that questions my worth, that has negative emotions, that has negative experiences? Well, Siddhartha, who became Buddha, was meditating under the Bodhi tree. And he was just about to go into enlightenment. And this shadow god appeared called Mara. And Mara tempted Buddha with all kinds of things, temptresses, food, etc., to come out of this meditative state. What transpired was, right as he was just about to come into enlightenment, his worth was questioned. And in that moment, just like everyone else, just like the rest of us humans, Siddhartha was thinking, you know, am I worthy of this? Am I worthy of enlightenment? And he, of course, did transcend. He became the Buddha. But for years, when he went around teaching in India and in loads of the teachings that he had, he still had this Mara came and would still kind of taunt him. But what did Buddha do? He invited Mara, who represents kind of greed, negative emotions, difficult challenges. He invited him for tea. And so I would encourage everyone that no matter what you're going through, maybe you're dealing with bereavements, maybe you're dealing with illnesses, maybe you've got separations, maybe all of the above. It is only our resistance to what is that leads to a lot of the negative circumstances that we face. I know this is challenging. I'm not saying this is easy. However, it's the most rewarding thing you can do. And this is why self-compassion is so powerful, because you can actually transform these negative situations into something for growth.
So I think here would be a good time to define what compassion is. And I think, and how that differs from empathy.
Great. Yeah. So self-compassion, the way that, there's loads of different definitions. The way I define it is showing an awareness of your suffering while setting an intention for growth. Okay, I'll keep it really simple, showing an awareness of your suffering while setting an intention for growth. And this is such an important bit, because a lot of people say self-compassion is lazy, it's pitiful, I'm just going to sit on the sofa and wallow. And it's completely not that. And we have some research from the Netherlands that shows us that when people are primed with self-compassion and they're trained in self-compassion, that their primary motor cortex is activated in their brain. It's just amazing, isn't it? Think about this, like your brain's priming you for action, to move, when you practice compassion for yourself and others, which is a beautiful thing. Empathy is another great research from Max Planck, and I've spoken about this a lot. I think it's a real, very fascinating bit of research. And as they often do in these studies, they train people in compassion or empathy, and then it's pretty brutal, actually. Think that they show these study participants images of suffering, like videos or pictures of suffering, and then they put them through a functional MRI scanner and they see how their brain responds. So people that are trained in compassion in this research from the Max Planck Institute, from I think it's 2014, they showed increased activation in the ventral striatum and the medial orbitofrontal cortex, which are the reward areas, which is absolutely fascinating, right? So that you literally get rewarded through the practice of compassion. It's the areas associated with joy, with nurture, with love, the same areas that a mother would have their brain light up when they were caring for their young. Empathy has the insular cortex light up, which is an area that's associated with an awareness of suffering. Now, I don't want to say that empathy is inferior, because it's not. Like I say, it's about understanding. And empathy is fantastic. It's a prerequisite for compassion, in fact.
I was going to say, without it, it's hard to be compassionate if you don't understand emotions and don't have empathy.
Exactly. And if I was going to sum this up with a fantastic, I'm sure many of you will have heard of this book. It's a book that I came into contact with when I was 13 years old. My mum was reading it. It's by Stephen Covey. It's, I think sold about 15 million, 20 copies worldwide. And one of the habits is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Now, I say this as much for myself as everyone, because I think we're all guilty sometimes, especially, if you're on the lifestyle medicine journey and you found out some exciting information and you just want to share it with someone before we fully understood, who they are, where they've come from, what the glasses that they wear, what's their belief system, how do they view the world? Mm-hmm. And the most kind of rewarding times in if you talk about, for example, the coaching business that I've got, all of the conversations that are built around understanding. And I think, there's a lot of medical benefits that can come from that. I think a deep and meaningful connection is extremely, extremely healing in a lot of ways. I'll just explain a little bit of science by that. I know hopefully some of you guys are as interested in these things as I could get carried away. But if you think about what Erica spoke about before, about feeling different. Well, we know that feeling different or feeling like you can't share anything meaningful with anyone, we know from research from Juliana Holt-Lunstad, who's kind of one of the pioneers of the loneliness movement or anti-loneliness movement. She shows us that when we feel different, we feel separate, we don't feel connected, that it's as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah. It's more harmful than obesity, than high blood pressure, all of the things that you'd speak about. And so, again, back to the phrase, choose compassion, focus on connection, making people feel connected. And they're having less stress hormones that are released. They're not in this kind of mentality where they feel outside of the tribe. And again, back to those blue zones, they have more meaning and purpose when they're connected with people. So, yeah, in a roundabout way, that it all makes sense, doesn't it? When you kind of listen to the science on this, and then you think about what intuitively feels right. For me, it's kind of a beautiful thing when those things marry up.
Yeah, interesting what you said about loneliness, and that's, as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And this, one of the main reasons we started Afternoon Tea with Docs was to address this loneliness issue, especially during the pandemic. Even though I'm surrounded by loving people, I've got a very supportive husband, and my in-laws live very close by. And at the start of the lockdown, we were connecting really well, and on Zoom and everything, and it felt nice. Some of you may know that I recently had surgery, and when I was recovering from surgery, I paused my clinical duties, so I wasn't going to work. So I stopped seeing patients, and I didn't have that social connection with staff members. And my husband was working very long days, 12-hour days, and I started to feel very, very lonely. And because I also took a step back from Afternoon Tea with Docs as well, I was just in my little world of loneliness. And when I came back, the world, honestly, the difference I felt, and actually making connection with other people again. And Linda knows I've been going out for walks a lot. I've been out for walks with some of the people on this call today, and contacting friends again, and actually going out and walking in nature to connect. Definitely loneliness. I'm glad you addressed that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story, Erica. That's one that I think every one of us has experienced some form of loneliness somewhere on the spectrum. And yours sounds quite profound, having surgery, not actually having that physical contact as well as the emotional contact. But I know for others, it may be that you've just had something really exciting happen in your life, and you want to share that with people at home, but they're all too busy, or they're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're talking about what's going on with them. And it can be as small as that, but that actually has a profound ripple effect. And it was through that Julianne Holt-Lunstad study that I started to realize something. So back to that, what we're talking about with occupational medicine, I was having these long conversations with people and noticing that people through one 45-minute conversation were healing from burnout, from stress, etc. But then from the coaching, I started to notice something really unexpected happen. It's the same thing as you were talking about, Erica, is that people came with the coaching. It wasn't about health coaching. It wasn't trying to get people off medications. That wasn't the primary intention, although a lot of the lifestyle medicine is incorporated into that. But I had people come off ADD meds, chronic pain meds, migraine meds, anxiety and depression medications. I had people stop smoking, reduce alcohol. And it kept happening time and time again, unintentionally. And it was through the same thing that we're talking about, just people feeling understood and connected. And all of a sudden, their needs that they felt they needed these things started to fade away. Now, I'm not saying if there are people who are on any of those medications, I'm not saying that those are useless medications. Let's be absolutely clear about that. And of course, make sure you consult with a medical professional before you do that. But I think every single one of us would do better through deeper and more meaningful connections. And the important caveat to that, which is in Vivek Murthy's book. He's US Surgeon General, or was under the Barack Obama administration, and he wrote a book called, I think it was called, gosh, the name's gone past me. It's not Connected. It's it'll come to me in a minute. In his book, he speaks about solitude as a really, really important way to combat loneliness, which you may think, wow, that's a little odd. Like, how is it that solitude helps with loneliness? Well, solitude is a pleasant experience of your own, being in your own skin, as it were. Whereas loneliness is, of course, a negative experience there. And if you can learn to be open with yourself, if you can lean into your suffering through self-compassion, like we speak about, that is actually how we connect with people. We connect with people through sharing, just like Erica did, stories of challenge, stories of suffering, campfire kind of chat. So yeah, I think these are important points. Solitude leads to, and it reduces loneliness. And there's a bit of an interesting kind of paradox there. I wonder what your experience is of loneliness, if any, and if you'll be happy to share. I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't say that I was going to question you.
I love the fact that you have spoken about solitude. Solitude has offered me as a child, as I have traveled across the world from Russia to Ukraine to Hungary, across the whole of the US, an opportunity to connect with myself. And I believe as long as we are not able to connect and understand ourselves, it's almost impossible to connect with anyone else. So the first thing that I have learned, I would say, is brutal honesty to ourselves about what we actually feel. Honesty to the degree where it almost hurts.
Mm-hmm.
That you have, when you learn about those things, you might have to lose something.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you understand yourself? Is through empathy. And I think what I see me growing up, and also the environment around us, is that our children, ourselves, and future parents are not taught, or they don't learn the words that are associated with emotion, the language of emotion. And without having words for something, our brain is unable to understand it. So the first thing that I dug into through my journey, which is quite a long one, I won't dig into that, but when I was at the point of self-compassion through surgical training, pushing myself as hard as possible, I learned that some of the things that medicine has pushed on me and my values do not align. And I learned that through the language of emotion. What is anger? What is sadness? What is suicide? What are these things teaching you? Because all of these emotions are neurological pathways that require you to act. Emotions are just telling you a story. They're telling you something that particularly do not align with your values, or they do. So if you didn't stand up for yourself, for example, you feel shame. If you stood up for yourself, but you were very disrespectful out of your own values, you feel anger. So now you feel shame and anger. So then the question is, how do I stand up for myself on a regular basis in a way that I feel proud of myself, but also I respect everybody around me? And I think through that journey, through learning about the language of emotion, a language which is not taught and is completely foreign to most of us, I think, nowadays. Learning that, I learned more to be compassionate with myself, because finally I understood what I was saying. And through understanding what I was saying, I no longer felt overwhelmed. I no longer felt like I want to be heard, but I don't know why. What is it that I want people to hear from me or myself? So through that journey, I was able to connect with myself. And through that, I found my love for medicine once again, because I was able to connect with patients in the moment, right now. So it wasn't about becoming a consultant anymore. It wasn't about getting my diploma or degrees, or, you know, these Western ideas about what is important. It was about being in the present with my patient. And when I was able to be in the present through compassion, as you teach so well, Nilesh, with my patient, now I have 30 patients a day, and every single time in A&E, I feel more and more enriched. I feel richer, more fulfilled, while I see my colleagues going less and less energetic during the day. Yeah. I go happier and happier, no matter. I finish my shift and I'm like, okay, when am I coming back? Let's go. Because every time I come in, I have an opportunity to connect with this, what you teach, compassion. Before, it was an empty space. It was like, here's a prescription, goodbye. So I felt really lonely. I felt depressed almost. I'm not really possibly able to be depressed, to be honest, my personality, but I felt really drained and definitely went to burnout.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got that, I don't know if you had the same experience. I think when you said about connecting with your patients with time, finally, for the first time in GP in 10 minutes, let's be honest, it's almost impossible to connect with anyone. Well, I think when you went to private practice or to companies, finally you could be a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Connect, because you need time to connect with people. You need time. You cannot do it without it. Everything takes time. So I would say definitely start with honesty, and through honesty, learn the language of emotion. And I would highly recommend Carla McLaurin's work here. Actually, her book is called Language of Emotion, where you can learn actually what each emotion is, how it's defined, and be honest with yourself. Try to find how you feel through those words. What do you think?
I remember just saying that, Sokin. That was such a beautiful story. I have a thing in my group coaching. Whenever anything like this happens, we show Linda some love in the chat. Can everyone just show Linda some love? Just a yes or a I'm with her, because that was very beautiful. And I could, you know, what a story. I didn't actually know that you were your background was in surgery, Linda. So that's a phenomenal story. I completely agree. And I mentioned the book would come to me. The Vivek Murthy book is Together. That's the one that you guys could check out as well. And he has a great phrase which kind of relates to everything that we said, which is loneliness is just an inbuilt reminder that we're stronger together. And so it's just, I mean, Linda just summed up so beautifully in that our emotions they're just feedback. They're just ways of calls to action. Emotions are biological. Like I kind of mentioned in the story about the Buddha, we will all experience negative emotions. You are no different because you've experienced these. They're chemical reactions, chemical memories. And that when it's very liberating, it's amazingly liberating when you discover this, because you think, wow, this is awesome. Okay, so I'm feeling a little bit of anger right now. That's probably because somebody's crossed my boundaries. So I can now go and set better boundaries, and then I will, feel more connected in that space.
And this boundary is very important, Nilesh. I think I love to just emphasize the word boundary, because we are not taught to create boundaries. And also, as I mentioned, we are not taught to learn about emotions. So what happens in a toddler? They start screaming, being hysterical, and we do the same, but unfortunately it's not acceptable, right? So we shut down and we become depressed instead. And all it is that we didn't learn how to express and create healthy boundaries. And those healthy boundaries actually open up a world where we can connect much better with each other, right?
Absolutely. And guys, by the way, I like I share with you, I've made a lot of mistakes. I continue to do so in some of these aspects. I have two kids. One's 8 months, Millie, and the other one's Freddie, who's 5. And Freddie's ongoing has got a significant number of challenges, and a lot of them are around managing emotions. Freddie struggles with his attention, his focus, impulsivity, and everything that you're mentioning, Linda. I remember there was one story in particular. My son we went to walk through like a wintry, muddy day in the park, and it was so much muddier than I could have ever anticipated. I'd said to my wife, don't worry, I'm going to take Freddie out. You just relax, it's going to be fine. And I took him out, and he got covered he wanted to run across the field and he got covered in mud. And there he was enjoying himself. And, there on one side, I was like, let him play in the mud. It's cool. But on the other side, the logical side, I was like, this is really filthy. I need to go off and clean up. So without seeking first to understand and be understood, I didn't ask him. I just picked him up. And he proceeded to have, like a really, really significant tantrum. In fact, and this isn't an exaggeration. It was kind of around, my son's kind of has got developmental challenges. So he went on to scream for about 10 or 20 minutes, really loud screaming, wouldn't get in the car, finally got in the car. And it was, I got home and I just sat and I just cried in my kitchen. I didn't know what to do. My son was really in a difficult position. He'd been violent at nursery. There were a lot of challenges there. But then it was only in that moment that, just like I've shared with you guys, that I have my phrase, which is believe in growth. That was the moment when that came out, when I realized that, okay, yeah, so I'm a father of a son with developmental challenges. He's struggling to manage his emotions, but surely I'm not the only person who's gone through this. And there was that liberating moment where I thought, okay, how have I figured out other problems in the past? Well, I've researched, I've looked online, I've asked people. And through that, my eyes were just opened. And I thought, no matter what's happened, no matter where we are, as long as we have that intention for growth, it doesn't matter what's happened. As long as you're kind of aiming to learn and move forward and to believe in a better future. So that was a real turning point for me. And still now, just before I came in here, there was a kind of a slushy related incident in the house where Freddie wanted a slushy. And so these things are ongoing. And I think probably for me as a parent, the biggest thing I have to remind myself is that, that it takes time, and they're kids, and they don't have their prefrontal cortex switched on like us. They don't have the same level of intention and the same words. Idea and word generation comes from our prefrontal cortex. If you think about it scientifically, it makes perfect sense. But of course, when we are in our own like limbic kind of chimp brain, you will have heard of the chimp paradox. I think, why are they screaming at me? Do they not know that I've only slept 5 hours last night? Do they not know that Millie, my baby, was up 4 times? Like, surely he should know that. So with all the kind of study and meditation and everything in the world, I urge people to understand that we're all human, and we all have those challenges and struggles. And these tools are great, but do understand that they're not meant to eliminate every challenge from your life, and those things will still be there.
I think children are a good example to show where we have to be better with our communication, with our understanding, always trying to learn how to approach them. But I think it's exactly the same for adults. Like, we forget that we, as you said, we are just human, and we should allow other humans to share their emotions, to be compassionate with them, to say, it's okay that you had a raging moment, because actually the world is so overwhelming right now. To give them a moment to say, you're safe. You can share your emotions. I know you feel overwhelmed. Why don't you talk to me? Why don't you move your arms up and down and you just let it all out? And it's not going to define you. It's just going to allow you to let it out, because without speaking, without pronouncing the problem, unfortunately, we cannot process. And I think too often in our world right now, especially in the Western world and traveling around the world, I notice different cultures use emotion and language differently to express compassion. If you go to Greece, it's okay to be loud, and it's okay to hug, and it's all right to just be passionate, right? When you go to Asia, it's not allowed. I would be kicked out of any Japanese restaurant for sure, because I'm too loud, too noisy. I want to touch everyone and everything, like a kid, And then if you come to England, again, a new culture. So in a globalized world, it is very difficult to immediately fit in. So I think more than ever, we have to actually say it out. It's okay for you to feel that way. And it's okay for you to share with me anything you want. I won't judge you. Afterwards, you will feel better, and you will be able to clear your thoughts. And whenever I do that with my patients or friends and family, I think they feel a bit shocked initially. Like, I just had an outrage and you are not taking it personal. I'm like, no, it's not about me. You shared something, so I'm not going to take it on me. I think that's an important bit, right?
Yeah, that's a very important bit. In fact, I'm going to relate back to the great story you shared earlier about your A&E and how your energy increased. And I know there are a lot of healthcare professionals that might be listening to this. And basically what Linda's talking about is compassion fatigue. I actually think that that's a bit of a misnomer after that Max Planck research. And I think it's more empathy related fatigue. So when you're kind of taking on the energy of people, you're an empath, you're very tuned into other people's emotions. And the bit that Linda was talking about so beautifully is when you're actually in the presence of enjoying a compassionate conversation, those kind of negative emotions you're receiving from other people, they're getting transformed into actually kind of joy and growth and love. And the best analogy I can look to for this, and it's not every time, but again, if we look at nature and we look at mothers caring for young, or we look at parents, anyone in particular caring for young, when a baby cries in the night, we don't think, God, how rude of that baby. Do they not know what I've been through? Maybe sometimes they do. I don't know. We'll be honest here. But we initial first reaction is to nurture that baby, to hold them, to keep them safe. We actually use touch. Touch is very underutilized. I was honored recently to speak with Professor Kristen Neff. And I asked her in an interview about self-compassion. She's one of the leading lights in self-compassion. So she's had 30,000 papers have been cited in her name. She was one of the people that really brought self-compassion into the scientific frontier. And I asked her, what do you do for self-compassion? And she said, touch. It's such a simple thing. One thing that I do, at the Lifestyle Medicine Conference, I spoke about the coin of compassion. I was using that. And actually now I've actually moved on to what's called the 1 second trigger, where I just twizzle the ring on my finger. It's both physical touch, which if you think of yourself as a child, that's one of the most important ways that you felt nurtured and cared for and safe. And also it's just something that you don't need an app for, you don't need anything for, anyone can do that. And you can say literally the following words. I want you guys to literally say the following words and just share it with me in the chat. Just notice how it feels when you say these words. It makes sense. Just say it makes sense. You see, in that moment, there's no resistance to the way things are. It's not saying that things are wrong, things are right, I should be better. Why is this happening to me? Like I was speaking about with my son covered in the mud, just, it makes sense. There is nothing that should be any different. And then at that moment, you start to set an intention for growth. Then I'd like you to ask the following question, which is, what would my most compassionate future self do next? Okay, and this is a priming for action. This is so absolutely vital. Okay, so you've acknowledged the emotion, you twizzled a finger or a ring on your finger, you said it makes sense, I understand, and then you ask yourself, what would my most compassionate self do next? I urge people to just try this, even just for one day, 1 week, and you'll start to notice, you'll find it a lot easier to drink those 8 glasses of water, to do that exercise, to have a meaningful conversation with someone, because you've come from that place of understanding yourself first and then going and moving forward. So I hope that makes sense. I've got loads more practical strategies that I can share with you. So I'm very much, we've spoken about quite a lot of esoteric things, and I love that, but I'm also very much about giving people actionable things to do as well, because it's important, isn't it? It's not just about talking about it, but doing it as well.
Absolutely. And here in Afternoon Tea, that's exactly what we are trying to do, translate the science into practical takeaways. So thank you for that. So first we say it makes sense when we have reflected on it. I think it's so cool that you mentioned about touch. I have just shared with Erica some time ago, I went down the path of studying the science behind touch. And there's an amazing array of books out there. But also I thrill my ring all the time. Erica asked how come I got a ring, because I never actually have any jewelry in my hand from surgery, and it makes a huge difference to be able to touch. But I would like to highlight now that we have been on the lockdown for so long, and so many people have been feeling really, really distressed. I've seen it in A&E, a lot of suicides, unfortunately, in all age groups, in 50s, 60s, 70s, even in the 80s. It is vital that we remember that touch is so important, especially here in England. Unfortunately, touch is not as common as in Europe. When I went down to my European trauma course, one of my colleagues actually mentioned, oh, I heard in England you're not, because she's coming from Portugal, coming to Cambridge, and she was asking about cultural norms. And I said, well, we don't kiss on the cheeks in the UK. She's like, oh, okay, I won't do that then. And also, don't really hug them unless they hug you first. She's like, okay. And then when we are speaking, we are touching each other constantly on the shoulder. It's like, yes, 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 you know, and grab both shoulders and like, yeah, and touch each other on the hand all the time. So I mentioned to her, better not to do that unless they're doing it first. And she's like, okay, but if they don't touch me while I'm speaking, how do I know I even exist?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And
I mean, this just reminded me of I've shared this with Linda, where so I came to school in the UK. I grew up in Hong Kong with a Chinese family. I'm Chinese, and I came to school in the UK in my teens. And coming from that background to here, I learned about hugging people. You know, and when I went home and I saw my mum and dad and I hugged them, you know what their reaction was? Recoil. What are you doing? What is this? They were so not used to it. Honestly, my mum was shocked. Was like, move away from me. What are you doing? But now they're now used to me hugging them. And talking about touch, one of my things is, if I really like somebody, like, you know, my mom, my sister, my husband, you know, I like to annoy them by touching them. Like, and when I sit next to my mom, I'm always annoying her, like touching her. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm showing my love for you. And this is my way of showing my love. Yeah, it's annoying, but, you know, understand where it's coming from. So just a little.
It is very interesting that you share that, because you brought that into your family and into your loved one who are very similar to your upbringing. And between us as well, with Erica, we have learned so much about the difference of culture and how we communicate with each other, because I grew up in a loud and very, well, I would say obnoxious, almost like noise. And my partner is from an Asian background too. So he always felt very similar, like with Erica, that I'm in their space, but with the silence and the quietness, I felt a bit, you know, it wasn't really right for me. So it's interesting to just say that it's very important to recognize that there are different ways that we express love and emotion. And it would be good to encourage people to ask, how do you feel love? How can I show you compassion? How can I express love in your language? And I know there has been the book, the 5 Languages of Love, but there is much more to it. I don't know if you have read it, Nilesh, and what your thoughts on.
Oh yeah, I've read it, because, you know, it was the day I found that I was giving love in the way that I expected to receive it, and then you kind of think, hey, how come this doesn't? It's a real eye-opening book, and it's so true. And I think this is just back to that same point: seek first to understand, and then be understood. I think, you know, a message that I just want to highlight before we get to the end is the importance of our perspective. Your perspective is everything. And one thing that we don't know, let's say you're meeting someone, you know, from in a healthcare setting, let's say you're meeting someone in a friendship setting, you never know what that person has seen, and more importantly, how they've perceived what they've seen up to that point. And anyone who's you know, had close relationships, you kind of discover these things over time, right? That for some people, birthdays are a huge deal, and for other people, birthdays are just, you know, that's fine, it's nothing much. Or for other people, that it's really important to have loads of positive affirmations said about you all the time. and for others it's touch. This relates to Gary Chapman's book, but perspective is everything. And that's why when you kind of have that, when your eyes are open to that, that's how you can switch from judgment to curiosity.
Yes.
It's only when you kind of go, oh, what, I don't actually know about this person. Like, where are they from? Who's their family? What was their family like? Like Linda shared, what countries have they been to? What have they seen? I think there's a great quote. Forget me, the name goes past me at the moment, but it's basically like, when you travel the world, if you only stay in the same country, it's like reading one page of a book. But when you travel the world, you really have this kind of rich experience of humanity, of what it means to be a human. So yeah, I urge everyone to shift a belief. If there's a relationship maybe that you're struggling with at the moment, which I'm sure everyone has at least one, just get intensely curious. Try getting intensely curious. And it's a difficult balance, guys. And this is something I should probably mention, something practical here. Everyone sits on this kind of thermometer, and I can tell, like, Linda, you're very much like me. You're definitely on the warm side of the thermometer. Like, I would feel very comfortable to hug you if I saw you for the first time. And some people, it's like completely cool, but they're just naturally on the cooler side. And this is a really important point to mention. If you're going to get intensely curious about someone, and you're warm thermometer kind of person, I'm laughing because I've made this mistake so many times, and they're not. It's very important you kind of slowly ease your way into that. And even it's something that I frequently do is the 2-option question. I do it with my son. He's come home from school. He's had an intense day. There's been 90 kids in the playground. He doesn't have time for me to ask, how was your day? He's not going to say, well, Daddy, this happened, that happened. It doesn't work like that. So we just have a question, which is, was it a good day or a great day? And it sets him up. He says, good day. I know it's probably not been such a good day. If he says great day, then we can go from there. And I'll urge people to check that out as well. Just get a sense. And when you observe someone's body language, when you observe their eye contact, and their tone, the way they're speaking, that's a very reliable indicator of kind of how warm they are, how open they are.
That's a really good point. I think I'm taking that away. I have been trying to work on this for a while now. And because we think that everybody's the same by default, even though you consciously think about it and they are not, in practice, it's very difficult when you want to show love and you have one way of showing it. And I think that the thermometer idea in my head will help me to say, okay, you're there, so let's bring down my tone. Let's speak your own language. Let me not come too close, because maybe and as you said, I made a lot of mistakes in the past where with too much love and compassion, I was trying to come too close, trying to sort out too many problems for somebody, and they don't want that. And you can even scare people away, which is not what we want to do. So great practical point there. Thermometer, it's good because I can visualize it.
Yeah.
Before I come to a person, patient, everyone. And then listen to yourself and then speak. That's great. Nice, Nilesh. Thank you.
And for all the clinicians in here, something that I started to religiously do when I saw patients was, if you did any of your exams, you check the date of birth, the name, the address, all these things. I started to do that. And you watch somebody come in, literally hunched over, stressed, and you start to ask them, just before I go ahead, I just want to check name, date of birth. They say, yes, 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 yes. You watch their body open up. Okay, right. What's the number one problem you'd like me to focus on today? It's not just a small thing, but, if you start straight away in a conversation, and of course, by the very nature of healthcare, it's a problem-focused conversation. It can kind of feel a little draining as well. And so always start, and the other thing I would always do is I'd always kind of make jokes. I would like to laugh and joke with them no matter what was going on. You can give people the gift of your energy, your joy, your presence, and that itself is compassion. You don't have to sometimes think of anything grand. Just you being in a good space is enough. I want to say it's not only compassion; it's actually medicine. Yeah, absolutely. Compassion is, that's the phrase I love to say, is compassion is the best medicine. Absolutely, it is.
When you give them just 5 minutes of your undivided attention, and as you said, Nilesh, with compassion, that it takes you to curiosity. And when you're curious, then you can truly show love. And we were talking with Erica about how love is truly, how cliche it sounds, is the best medicine there is.
Yeah.
Because through that grounding and love that you feel for someone, it cannot be faked. It cannot be faked, and they can feel it. Like we know animals can feel it, humans can feel it too. We are not just thinking all the time, but we are trying to complicate things when it's actually love. Just show love and allow them to find themselves and their healing within that grounding of your love. I think it's the best thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to pick up on one more thing that Linda said, which is something that I was smiling inside, because it's something that I absolutely suffered with as well, which is that unconscious need that a lot of us have in healthcare to fix and sort the people in front of us. And this isn't just healthcare, right? This is husbands, wives, cousins, everyone. And I say it's an unconscious need because it is, often we are not aware that we ourselves, and this is what I had to remember, that I was willing other people to change in ways that, and this is maybe difficult to hear, but bear with me, this is what I found. I was willing people to change in maybe ways that I hadn't fully done yet. And that was initially a bitter pill for me to swallow, but again, a very liberating one. And it's not as simple as, okay, no, I do eat healthily and I do exercise and I do these things. I'm asking people to do that. It's more about the kind of emotion and the energy behind that. Like maybe you're frustrated because somebody is procrastinating on something that you feel like they must do. And if you think about it, you're like, actually, no, I also do that. We all do that, right? And so I think that, the inner connection is kind of like this piece of solitude and loneliness. It's the same sort of the same concept of always start inside out first. And something really magical happens when you commit to that. Once you start committing to the inside out, you'll notice people around you start to change. I'll share a story with you. My father's is very chronically unwell. He's had diabetes, he's had kidney transplants, he's had strokes, heart attacks. I've witnessed him having a lot of these things over the last 20 plus years. And for a long time, oh my gosh, I was willing him to change. And it was only when I really asked myself a really painful question, which is, why am I willing him to change so much? And after I went on the lifestyle medicine path, I actually felt embarrassed that I had a father that wasn't practicing lifestyle medicine. And, I felt that me ashamed that I can't even help my own father. How can I help my patients? And then I thought for a minute, wow, this is crazy. This is all about me. This is all about the ego. Like, this is about my experience and my stuff. What about my father? Like, what's gone on with him? I didn't know what's gone on with him. So in the pandemic, me and my brother set up a weekly call with my dad, which was not about getting him to lose weight or any of this stuff. It was literally a podcast. We'd listen to a podcast, be anything. And my dad came alive. My dad, through that connection, through this regular conversation, my dad was taking notes on these podcasts. He was calling us up. This is someone who would literally, would struggle to kind of leave the house and was, having a lot of chronic health problems. It was only once that I completely accepted him for who he was, and I decided to let go of that, did we start to see him change. So something, like I say, something really magical happens when you take the inside out approach. It's not the easy path, but boy, is it a liberating one.
Nilesh, I think we have all gone through exactly that story, and it's so brave of you to share it, because we do want the best for our family, but the best might not mean what the best is for us. And often we have to find out, and always we have to find out, what is the best for them? How can I help you? It's not about me. And to do that, again, it's with compassion, being compassionate to ourselves and to others through finding that grinding, difficult question and answer back and forth, to really find who we are. And that takes a lifetime. And you're definitely on an incredible journey, an honest, authentic journey where you're doing that. And I can just applaud you and your energy. And I would love to ask everybody to show some love for Nilesh here in the chat. And if you're on YouTube, let us know what you're thinking, your testimonial, share some love, emojis. It's just incredible to be able to be honestly speaking about something so painful, that is our growth. And through our growth, we are able to then truly help others rather than make them do what we want them to do, like in patriarchal medicine that we are unfortunately practicing in the West right now. So Nilesh, let me ask you, what are the 3 takeaways, practical takeaways that you would share with our audience today so that immediately they can go out there and implement it right away?
Yeah, okay, well, we spoke about the inside out approach a lot. I'll share with you my 3 A's for compassion, which very interestingly came a long time ago when I first started on this journey. And the first A is showing awareness of your own suffering. Okay, so that might be with the little ring twizzle, like Linda beautifully said, naming the emotion. The second A is the agreement in meaning. This is the phrase, it makes sense. Now this works for you, yourself, it works for others as well. Just notice what happens when you listen intently to someone and then you say, yeah, that makes sense. You watch them, their shoulders drop. And then the third A is intention for action. Awareness of suffering, agreement in meaning, intention for action. So it's that compassionate intent with that question, what would my most compassionate self do next in this situation? So that's, I love a mnemonic. I'll give you just one more kind of point within that, which is, let's say you are on that journey and you are trying to improve yourself and you're like, Nilesh, yeah, but I also want to help my family and my loved ones. Well, I have this acronym for that as well, which is ABC. And the A is anecdotes. Stories, like we shared loads of stories today. God, they are powerful. And there's something really phenomenal that goes on in our minds. When we share stories, everyone will be relating that to them. So when you share stories about your patients, about loved ones, about friends and family, and you share it authentically, that's one of the most powerful things you can do for somebody who's struggling. The B is be the change. I think you got bored of me saying this inside out approach, but role modeling the way. And remember, what I mean by that is not, you don't just role model the specific behavior, but you role model the values and the character of which you wish that person to show. And the last one, which is the C, is clues. You know, Tony Robbins famously says, success leaves clues. Loads of people say this, success leaves clues. And so you can leave clues for your loved ones, gentle clues. It could be, it starts off with sending them an Instagram post, a video, a reel, a blog article. You can leave books on your desk. The clues thing is actually a very simple one. If you're genuinely being that new character, that new identity, your clues will be everywhere. It will be so easy for people to see. And then that sparks their curiosity. And they say, so how did you become so much happier in the last year? Or, you know, how did you do this? Or and there you go. And then you're away. Then you can start speaking to them openly and sharing your story. So 3 A's and then the ABC for your friends and family.
Incredible 3 points and really practical, something that I've been practicing myself. So definitely can say from my own skin that it is working, but it takes a lifetime, and people think that it will change immediately. No, I think we need to just make it clear, anything in lifestyle has to be practiced on a daily basis. There is no magic formula, and it starts with compassion to ourselves. So thank you so much, Nilesh, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our talk. Thank you very much for everybody. We have so much positive feedback, Nilesh. Graham just wrote on Facebook, actually, just to say what a great conversation, and the fact that it's coming from 3 medical doctors. For me, this is going to blow my mind in the future and today, and to show the practice that it is possible to show compassion. It's wonderful. So many love emojis and positive feedback. Thank you very much for everybody joining us here on YouTube and Facebook. And for those who have joined us on Zoom, we will go to our non-recorded 30-minute informal consultation with Nilesh to see what your questions are and so that you can have a direct dialogue with us. So if those who have not joined us yet on social media, you can find us on Afternoon Tea with docs.com on website, or on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn as well. You can join us every single Sunday on Zoom, so that you can have a real conversation with us to address chronic diseases and loneliness in a supportive community. You can connect with Nilesh. Nilesh, do tell us, where can anybody and everybody connect with you?
Thank you. First of all, by the way, one thing I really loved about this conversation is that we got to find out about you guys as well. And I hope you guys share your stories, because, you know, the work you're doing, I was mentioning it before in the call, is true compassionate change maker, where you're led by this compassionate purpose of helping others, relieving their suffering. So much gratitude and appreciation for you guys inviting me on. It's super, super rare that I do anything on a weekend that's kind of related, but I thought I would really love to speak to you guys. So I'm very, very grateful for you. Yeah, I love to connect with people. Do forgive me though. One thing I will mention is that I can be a little slow, and so forgive me if I'm slow to get back, but I do love to connect with you guys at drsatguru.com, which is just drsatguru.com. I'm probably most active on Instagram. I've got some stuff on LinkedIn as well. Again, the handle is just Dr. Satguru. Yeah, reach out. And the one thing I love to always hear from people is what are you struggling with? What are you finding challenging? Because essentially I make content from that. That's something that I really love to do. So feel free to do that. And yeah, that's basically it.
Nilesh, you do so much, so please do not be sorry for taking some time to reply. I mean, you're constantly active, giving your time freely, so thank you so much for that. Thank you for being on a Sunday with us here, and we really appreciate everything that you do. Thank you so much. Now we're gonna go off recording, and that always takes me a technical challenge.